Buenas tardes. Bienvenidos a todos y gracias por asistir al webinar de StealthBits Privilege Activity Manager. Y hablando de privilegios, hoy tenemos el privilegio de contar con un veterano de la tecnología de Privilege Access Management. Se trata de Martin Cannard, Vicepresidente de Estrategia de Producto de StealthBits, con 30 años de experiencia en ciberseguridad y especializado en PAM. Lideró el equipo de gestión de privilegios de acceso en Beyond Trust, compañía que convirtió en líder de la industria en solo 3 años, y donde también condujo el desarrollo del primer PAM 6. Previamente, Martín ya había ostentado puestos directivos clave en Questel, Novell, Fortify y Symantec. Respecto a mí, soy Zane Ryan, CEO y cofundador de DotForce, empresa con 14 años de experiencia. Anteriormente establecí RSA Security de España e Italia en el año 2000. En DotForce tenemos experiencia en el sector de PAM, ya que hemos representado a firmas como Centrify y Tecote. Y personalmente conozco de primera mano las limitaciones y complejidades de las soluciones PAM tradicionales. Por ello, en DotForce ahora apostamos por SbPAM por su simplicidad y capacidad de superación de las deficiencias de las soluciones actuales de PAM. Os recuerdo que solo por asistir a este webinar, vuestra compañía podrá disfrutar de una instalación remota gratuita de SbPAM y una licencia de uso de 60 días. La instalación se hará en más o menos 1 hora y se pondrá en producción en menos de 6 horas. DotForce es mayorista de StealthBits desde 2017. Esto nos ha permitido conseguir clientes importantes, no solo por la calidad de sus productos, sino también gracias al gran apoyo que StealthBits ha dado a nuestros partners de canal en todos los proyectos que hemos desarrollado para asegurar la satisfacción de los clientes. Ahora voy a hablaros brevemente sobre StealthBits y luego pasaré la palabra a Martín, que nos explicará los riesgos del movimiento lateral, un poco sobre la evolución de las soluciones PAM y cómo funciona SbPAM, y terminará realizando una demostración. Si en algún momento tenéis alguna pregunta, podéis enviarla a través del panel de preguntas de GoToWebinar. También podéis hacer las preguntas en inglés o español y las responderemos una vez que la demostración haya finalizado. La misión de StealthBits es proteger los datos sensibles y las credenciales de las fuentes de usuario que los ciberdelincuentes pueden utilizar para robar datos, con soluciones de buen gobierno de acceso a datos, seguridad de gestión de directorio activo, gestión de las cuentas privilegiadas. StealthBits hace fácil tener visibilidad y control de los privilegios de todo tipo de usuarios en los sistemas de ficheros, Active Directory, calidad, Windows, Unix y Linux, base de datos, email, SharePoint, y en cualquier plataforma de almacenamiento on-premise, como pueden ser los sistemas NAS y también en la nube. Además, sus soluciones incluyen workflows basados en web para facilitar la gestión y control sobre las actividades y privilegios de los usuarios. Las soluciones de StealthBits suelen formar parte complementaria a otras soluciones de IAM, CIEM, prevención de fuga de datos, migración a la nube, consolidación de dominios, migraciones de Active Directory e incluso PAM de otros fabricantes. StealthBits ya tiene 18 años de experiencia en el mercado y es una empresa privada totalmente autofinanciada, algo poco habitual hoy en día, y que es una muestra de que se trata de una empresa consolidada y fiable. Además, ha sido rentable todos los años desde que inició su actividad. StealthBits también ha sido galardonado con diversos premios por su avanzada tecnología, tiene sus propias patentes y es altamente valorada por los gurús de la industria TIC. La misión de StealthBits es asegurarse de que nadie utilice credenciales de usuarios para fines no autorizados. Gracias al control de los privilegios de los usuarios, StealthBits asegura que solo las personas autorizadas pueden acceder a la información necesaria para su trabajo, mediante una política de privilegios mínimos. SbPAM de StealthBits ofrece muchos beneficios a sus clientes. Por ejemplo, puede impedir que los usuarios con privilegios expongan información confidencial de la empresa a otros usuarios que no tengan privilegios para acceder a dichos datos. Es más, como parte de sus soluciones, StealthBits tiene un módulo de descubrimiento que ofrece visibilidad de los datos sensibles para poder protegerlos con los controles adecuados. De esta forma, una vez que se ha instalado, SbPAM descubrirá de forma automática las carpetas y ficheros que contengan datos sensibles que estén en situación de riesgo por ser accesibles por cualquier usuario. También descubre en AD cuentas de usuario que dispongan de permisos que no deban tener. Además, incluye informes de cumplimiento de normas de protección de datos como PCI DSS, RGPD o EPA. StealthBits también permite realizar auditorías en AD para eliminar las cuentas que no sean utilizadas, ya que forman parte de la superficie de ataque, limpiar los sistemas de ficheros de carpetas obsoletas para liberar espacio de almacenamiento e incluso descubrir sistemas obsoletos para eliminarlos. El catálogo de StealthBits tiene 5 productos, cada uno con varios módulos y posibilidades de configuración. StealthBits es una herramienta de auditoría de los privilegios y actividades de los usuarios. Si quieres saber qué ha pasado con el fichero o un recurso de AD, quién puede acceder a él y con qué permisos, StealthBits es la solución. StealthDefend, utilizando Machine Learning, detecta en tiempo real anomalías de comportamiento en los sistemas de ficheros IAD y puede invocar playbooks para bloquear automáticamente actividades anómalas. Stealth Intercept se basa en reglas de comportamiento y previene cualquier actividad no autorizada. SbPAM, del que Martin nos hablará con detalle. Y, por último, Stealth Recover, que permite probar cambios en AD en modo de simulación antes de implementarlos, para comprobar si generan errores o efectos no deseados. E incluso si los cambios ya se han realizado, se puede volver atrás a un estado anterior estable. Para terminar esta introducción, quiero destacar que Gartner afirma que las soluciones actuales de PAM, que se basan en la gestión de las cuentas privilegiadas, en cuentas y accesos, no son la solución ideal. Y reconoce que las soluciones modernas de PAM están evolucionando hacia la gestión de las actividades. Ahora paso la palabra a Martín para que nos hable con más detalle de SbPAM. Okay, Martin, it's over to you now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's just change the presentation over. All right, just waiting for the screen share to start.
Okay, we can see your screen.
All right, can you see the one with the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for attending the session. Looking forward to talking to you a little bit about how StealthBits does privileged access management differently. One of the really key areas that we differ is we have a very big focus on lateral movement, and lateral movement is really a mechanism that attackers use to move around environments. So typically they will compromise the system, they will gain administrative access, then there's a number of different attack techniques that they will try in order to move around. Typically, the very first thing attackers will try is something known as a pass-a-hash attack. They're going to try to dump out the local LSAS table and really look for other administrative accounts in the environment with the same password. Now, most PAM solutions out there do a good job at protecting against this. And so, really there's, I mean, ultimately that's, really a given in the space. Even products like Microsoft Lapse, allows you to be able to protect against. One of the key areas though, where there's a gap is, they don't do a very good job at removing the accounts or their permissions, so that even though they might be rotating credentials, then the permissions still exist. Now, an attacker coming into an organization is always going to be on the lookout for artifacts that are in the memory. So, Kerberos tickets that can be exploited in order to be able to use these dedicated accounts or domain level accounts in order to be able to move around from system to system. Now, very often these types of accounts, these types of attacks are done, on an opportunistic basis. So the attackers rarely have a plan for, exactly which system they're going to go to, and essentially, even what they're looking for very often. But what they do is they use these different attack techniques and then use accounts of privilege in order to be able to move around. Now, up until now, the focus has always been on locking down endpoints, making sure that we're able to prevent a user from accessing an endpoint, or prevent it from being compromised through, antivirus, malware, intrusion detection software, endpoint protection. It stands if the machine doesn't compromise, then we take away the attack. But what if we assume that, for whatever reason, maybe that system does become compromised? Maybe there's, maybe there's some type of attack vector or zero-day attack, that allows an attacker to gain administrative access. So what we should be doing is, as well as working on endpoint protection, we should also be focusing on looking after the accounts that people use to move around from system to system. These are like vehicles, so an attacker will use these accounts to move around, whether it's a pass a hash type of attack, or whether it's more of a lateral movement involved in sort of Kerberos tickets. Now, when we look at the existing privileged access management solution set that's out there, we've been turning to those for years, and as described earlier, I mean, I'm from that space. I helped build the #2 product in the market. The biggest issue is, when we look back at the history of how, the current product set evolved out there, I think we quickly realized that, they were designed in a different era. They were designed around a model that was called shared account password management, SbPAM, it used to be called. There was a lot of compliance, regulation, around that era. And at this point, about 18 years ago, was really that genesis where organizations wanted to start, pushing out these types of technologies to make sure that all of their, super user accounts, or the built-in accounts to systems, were managed. Now, for the first 10 years, and I always call this the first decade of the millennium. This was really the decade of the vault. This was, privileged account management. When we get into the second decade, this is where we started to introduce, solutions such as proxies. The nice thing about proxies is you don't expose the user to the credential. It gets played into the proxy automatically. Similarly, it also allows you to be able to, record that session activity and also work around network segmentation. Around that time, around 2012, 2013, there was a lot of legislation around, the corporate responsibility of making sure you had separate networks, segregated networks, where important resources were set up. So anything with customer facing information, intellectual property for the company, they really had to be separated out. And proxies, helped that. Around 2014, this is about sort of 6-7 years ago, this was really when Microsoft started to push the dual account model. And it's a very great security model. It's built on a long-standing best practice of separation of duty. So you have a productivity account that has no permissions. You do your desktop and email, and then you have a separate administrative account, which could be like a -A, -ADM, -admin, you know, some prefix or suffix around the SAM account name that would be assigned to every user for each area of the business they need to access as administrator. So for example, if I've got 5 domains, I might have 5 -A accounts. I might have like an Cannard -A account in every single one of those domains as a domain admin. I might have a delegated permission for Exchange or for vSphere, you know, ESX, or any, you know, other type of tool, you know, where we're using delegation. Over the years, though, what we've been doing is we've been building up an attack surface where it actually makes it easier for attackers. When we think about it, an attacker is going to come in, they're not interested about passwords, they're not interested about vaults. What vaults do is they stop the good guys from getting more access than they need. So when the admin, in this case, is finished, it rotates a credential and it logs them out of the proxy. An attacker who comes in, let's say, isn't concerned with passwords, they look around for all of these artifacts and memories, all of the tickets. And, you know, it stands to reason that the more of these accounts that you have in your domain with privilege, then the easier you're making it for the attacker, because now, you know, you're giving them a very rich playing field, you know, to be able to work with. So what we've done as StealthBits is say, you know, you don't need to put everything into a vault. There's really 2 different sorts of accounts that people use. So, you know, when we look at the, you know, how SbPAM is architected, there's the, you know, the built-in accounts, you know, administrator, root, you know, those types of accounts, you know, CSSA, you need to rotate them. You need to be able to put those in a vault. So we can do that. Now, you know, you also, there's a whole, you know, set of other accounts that really don't need to live in a vault. Those dedicated accounts, you know, that belong to you and me. So if you've got some, you know, some letters, some prefix around your SAM account name, nobody else needs to share that. You don't need to manage the password. The only reason we put these credentials in vaults at the moment is because of the way that the existing PAM products were generated 18 years ago. They're built around a change on release model. That means that when you finish with a password, it changes it, so the user doesn't know. Now, you know, if you have a dedicated account, if I want to put my -A account and I want to be logged in automatically for the proxy, I have to have a vault rotate that account and store it, because if it's changing it on release, I need to store it so I know what it is the next time to play it in the proxy. Now, what we've done as StealthBits is say, well, you don't need to do that. We can give a credential, a password at the start, or even, you know, we don't even need to store the credential. Why are we even putting our -A accounts in vaults in the first place? So what we have is, you know, really 2 mechanisms. One is that allows you to be able to, you know, keep, you know, a dedicated account, could be -A, could be -ADM, and, you know, what you're going to do is you are going to assign the rights and permissions when the user starts, you know, when they need to log into somewhere, and then when they finish, we remove the permissions. We disable the account and we scramble the password. This means that really that account is just a benign artifact. It's not, it doesn't represent a risk. Even if you get a Kerberos ticket to one of those accounts, it can't do anything. Now, the other approach is that we have these things called activity tokens, which is an ephemeral account. Now, quite simply, an ephemeral account is an account that only exists for a short period of time. So in other words, you know, in our case, an activity token, as soon as the user's finished with it, it'll be deleted. It's an account. Now, the best way to think of this thing is think of taxis, you know, or ride shares. At the moment, you know, let's say, for example, we say each one of your administrators has 5 different accounts which are unique to them. Each one, I would suspect, has a different purpose. So they're going to have a domain admin account for domain A, domain admin account for domain B, maybe another account which I said maybe gives some sort of exchange permission. So each one of those can only do one thing. Now, if you think of taxis, you don't have 5 taxis parked outside of your house. and only one can go to one place. You don't have a taxi that's manufactured that can only drive to a specific destination. The taxi driver will take you where you need to go. So, ultimately, you call up a taxi, you tell it the destination, you get there and you get one, a different one the next time. But this is the way we should be treating our privileged accounts. These are vehicles, these are taxis. Whether it's a -A account that, you're keeping, that we're just really maintaining and adding permissions on the fly, or whether it's an activity token that we're going to completely delete at the end of every session, it really is, the same type of process. So essentially, what we're doing here is, we're creating vehicles. So when an administrator needs to perform a task, whether it's logging into, group policy, or, Active Directory use in computers, or they need to pull up a management console, or even a, database administrator needs to access SQL Server Management Studio. What we can do is we can say, here's an account, we can create it, we can give it the permissions that it needs. So for example, a DBA, maybe we give it, a domain group, rights that gives them sysadmin rights to the database. We can then log the user in using that particular account, but then afterwards, we then delete the account. Now there's 3 benefits if you in this model. One is that there's no liability, because you're not storing the accounts anywhere. So there's, basically there's no overhead, there's nothing for people to compromise. The second one is there's no overhead. If you don't have the accounts, there's nothing to rotate. You don't have to worry about rotating credentials if they don't exist. And the third one, and the most important thing, is reduced attack surface. What we're doing is we're making sure that if an attacker does compromise a single host in your environment, they can't get anywhere else, because there's no accounts that would allow them to be able to move around. So essentially your domain admins, when they're home and sleep in bed, shouldn't be a member of any access control groups. We will add them to those groups as and required. So as I mentioned, SbPAM is this vehicle that allows administrators to do their job. Now it's made up of 3 very simple elements. You have, your administrators, so these are users or groups of users that need to, perform tasks. You then have the tasks they need to perform. So in this case, it might be a very broad task, like I need domain admin rights to this domain, or it could be, give me reset password rights to this specific OU. And so what we can do is we can add in those use cases, and then, we can tie the user to a resource. So, it's a really simple access policy that says these users can run these activities on these resources. Now, the really key element that differentiates SbPAM is that, we have these activities which are workflow, so start to finish, what they allow you to be able to do is to create or enable an account. So, we can allow you to be able to choose, as to whether or not you want to keep a -A, in which case we'll just enable it, give it credentials, give it a password, log you in, and then afterwards we do the reverse. Or with an activity token, we're going to create the account, again, add it to whatever groups you need locally or on the domain. And then as soon as the user's finished, there's a post-session task that will then remove all those permissions. The important thing is at the end of the activity, the user has no more permissions than when they started off with. Now, the other nice thing about this approach is, we have interchangeable steps that you can add in. You can drag and drop these around. You can add your own custom steps using PowerShell. And I've got some out of the box ones. So for example, purge Kerberos tickets. When a user has finished a session on a server, let's purge out any Kerberos tickets. That way, if that box becomes compromised, we're not leaving anything behind for another attacker. Let's say, for example, we are worried about an attacker that might come in and compromise, an environment. Then, maybe they're an insider person, so there's a threat actor. Then we can also purge the Kerberos tickets at the start of a session as well. So essentially what we're able to do is, we can create, this model where we can add permissions at the start and then simply remove them at the end. And then through all these additional steps, you can perform tasks like, map network drives, connect to shares. You could run PowerShell to maybe block outbound firewall access. So, block outbound 3389, stop a user from RDPing somewhere else when they're logged into the host, and then give them remote desktop user rights so they can't reset that permission. So many ways you can reset this. Now, the login account, as I mentioned, that's the important thing. So, you can certainly have a model where the user doesn't have to have more than one account. So we could just add the permissions directly to the logged in user. So that's the requester. There's a managed account option, where, as I mentioned, that's your -A, where we'll enable the account, add permissions, and then at the end we disable and basically remove the permissions, or the activity token, which is where we're adding it and we're removing it. Now, when we look at compliance and the traditional way that we deal with things like access certification, generally there's an identity and access management system in an organization that creates the accounts, these privileged accounts, and then you have a PAM solution that maps people to those accounts. Now, with SbPAM, those accounts don't exist in the identity and access management system, because what we're able to do is we can create the accounts dynamically as they're required, and then as soon as the user's finished, we then remove them. So this is the reason why we call them tokens as opposed to accounts, because they are just short-lived, that they're one-off. Now, what that does is it does mean, though, that when you want to do access certification, you're not going to go to your identity and access management product. So we have built in access certification to the solution. This allows you to be able to generate a set of entitlements. You can approve, you can deny access. It allows you to be able to commit the changes as a reviewer, and then it will dynamically set the access policy. But the nice thing about it is you can look at any point at which permissions have been set for users. Who set this approval? Who set this denial? Are there any elements of the access policy that perhaps haven't even been set yet? Maybe there's, we've actually set some permissions, for a user that, really is just, something that isn't on the access policy. Nobody certified it. So it allows you to be able to evaluate all of that, and you can also export this certification information. The other interesting thing when we look at PAM solutions is a lot of PAM vendors will force you to rip and replace the product that you already have. Now, the way that I look at things is, when it comes to PAM solutions and vaults, we're all the same. Every PAM vendor has a vault, including us. It does exactly the same thing. They're all as secure as each other. And so it stands to reason that if you already have a vault in place, you can put SbPAM on top of that product. We can store our data in that other vendor's vault, if you like, or store it in our vault. But the important thing is we will then allow you to be able to remove all of those dedicated accounts from the environment. So we're clearing the attack surface and clearing the overhead. The other interesting thing, and this is actually something that I very often ask customers is, do you use Lapse? Because Lapse, has been around for quite a few years. As you're probably aware, it stands for Local Administrator Password Solution. It's a Microsoft component of Active Directory. To enable it, you download, there's some PowerShell scripts that you run, and there's a small client component that you push out to your endpoints via group policy. But essentially, it works via group policy to rotate local administrator accounts. Now, what a lot of PAM vendors normally do is they'll come in and say, oh, don't use Lapse because it's not secure, it doesn't have workflow, there's no session management. They'll say, use our solution. But when you think about it, now you're replacing a solution that's already set up. Active Directory is already deployed in your environment. You've already got your domain controllers, you've got your scalability, you've got your redundancy, all of your desktops or laptops, people that are remote, they're already having their credentials changed. Why replace it with something that's going to do exactly the same thing? Because now you end up with complexity. Now you end up, with basically having, all of these sort of network, and firewall changes to make. And the other issue that you get is all PAM solutions push the password changes out. So with a server, if these are always on, it's fine. Whenever I need to make a password change with a PAM solution, I push it out and it gets made. The problem is what if I'm a laptop? What if I'm a user that's only connecting to the network? Maybe I'm working from home, working over a VPN. Imagine a PAM solution having to try to, actually make a password change at the point when that workstation or desktop is connected. So that's where Lapse comes into play. Lapse is a great, it does it via group policy. If I've got a desktop or a laptop, as soon as I turn it on, it, group policy gets refreshed. And then as soon as group policy gets refreshed, Active Directory then makes a password change. So you can always be sure that passwords will get changed on non-server endpoints. That's one of the benefits of Lapse. Now, what we do is we just talk to Lapse. So, we can certainly change passwords like the other vendors. We can go out and we can do the other model and talk directly to the systems. But if you already have something in place, why not use it? So we can use Active Directory like a vault. We can, extract a credential, an administrative account when a user needs access, and then we can check it back in when the user's finished, and then we can even force Lapse to do a password reset. So if we look at, the traditional challenges and the reason why a lot of people don't use Lapse is, yes, it does have an old interface. It exposes the password over time. There's no just-in-time access. There's no strong authentication, and there's no forced reset. But we can front end all of that. We can give a modern, clean interface. We can give session management. We can not have to give the user the password. We can change the password on release. So, we really provide all of the benefits without having to, really sort of create more, problems in your infrastructure. So, what we do with SbPAM is we try to work with anything that you already have, if that's an option for you or something you prefer. Now, the other thing that we've done, and we've had a great opportunity to do, is really write a very modern PAM solution. There's lots of PAM solutions out there. We all know, the existing vendors, the big ones, obviously, CyberArk, Beyond Trust, Thycotic. But there's lots of small vendors. You've got Assyrium, you've got Remediant. There's, vendors seem to be popping up, every year, to do different things. Now, when we built this as StealthBits, we could have taken that same approach and say, let's build another PAM solution the same as the others. What we did was we said, look, we've been working in the PAM space since its inception. So, I've been working with PAM for almost 20 years. I understand the challenges. I've deployed all of the PAM solutions in customer environments right over the world. And, so I understand, what some of the key issues are when we try to install PAM that goes across all the products. It's not unique to any particular vendor. So, we had the opportunity to do that and also build essentially an application that is delivered on-prem that will, also work within the cloud. Now, we can run this on Windows. It can run on Linux. It can run on Docker. It says, to install it, we call it the SbPAM challenge. We can do a POC in less than an hour. I don't think you'll find there's any other PAM vendor that can do that. It's, the installation is actually outlined on this fast track document. It's 20 minutes to install these two components. And then, there are about 8 steps that you have to configure it and get it talking to Active Directory. And that's it. That's all you need to do. The use cases take minutes to set up. It is the easiest PAM product you install. And we've had many customers say, this isn't just the easiest PAM product they've installed. It's actually the easiest product. It's very, very straightforward and easy to push out. Now, the other thing that we've also done is we've made this very accessible. So a lot of organizations don't generally deploy PAM because it's complex. You know, it's not just expensive, but, you know, there's a high cost of ownership. There's lots of things that you need to understand. There's lots of confusing and conflicting terms and lots of edge cases. But what we've done is demystified it. We've made a very straightforward, simple deploy PAM system that can work in an environment, you know, again, can be set up in an hour, that, you know, can go anywhere from 2 admins to 200 admins. But we will also scale up to millions of servers, tens of thousands of administrators through the scale out architecture. That's kind of the benefit of what we've built with the web services model and building everything around what we call a service mesh. So, you know, you can add as many components as you like. Now, the other thing we've done is we've also made it easy for you to be able to consume this license-wise. So there's no additional licensing for components. We don't license for session management. We don't license for access certification. We don't include it in the price. We purely license the product based on the number of administrators that you have in your environment. That's simply all we do. Now, the nice thing is, you know, when we look at the, you know, the way that this is configured, you know, this is something where, you know, you can go straight in. We've actually had customers that will do a POC and then turn that to their production system. We just simply replace a license key. But this is something that we've allowed people to be able to really sort of come on board with PAM that wouldn't necessarily otherwise. Now, you know, this is, you know, kind of a repeat. This is the, you know, the quote that Zane brought up earlier. You know, when we look at, you know, the important thing here, it's zero standing privilege. That's really the key aspect of this. Every PAM product is just in time. A lot of vendors will use this quote. Phycotic did the other day in a blog, but they missed out the zero standing privilege part. They just focus on just in time. Every PAM solution by its nature is just in time. So what we have is a capability to be able to remove the privileges when they're not actively being used. Now, if we take a look at the, you know, what we do as a feature set, as you'll see, you know, we can do credential rotation, the same as the others. We can do service account management. So we can, you know, enumerate all the Windows services, the scheduled tasks on all your hosts, map, you know, those all of those accounts and services together. And we also provide a visual workflow. So when you need to change, for example, a service account, then when you click the button, you can see visually as every service changes, you know, whether it's pending, whether it's failure, or whether it's successfully completed it. If you get an issue, we have a rollback button. Now, the key thing to this, and this is something that you know, I've experienced. One of the reasons why you know, this product is being built out of a lot of real life use cases I've experienced myself. You know, I've been in situations where I've had service accounts and I've had a few hundred servers that were using that service account. Now imagine if you're going through, and generally to change a few hundred service accounts may take, you know, 20-30 minutes. Now imagine your network suddenly goes down, or, you know, half of your systems go offline, or a firewall, you know, a rule, you know, takes place, and so, you know, all of a sudden you can't access those servers. Now all of a sudden you've got half of your systems that have one account and half of them with the other. You've just broken your infrastructure. So what we do with service account management is we simply have a rollback button. If you see a problem, you can pause it so it doesn't make the problem worse, and then you can click the rollback and it undoes the changes. This is really ultimately what we're doing with SbPAM. It's, you know, the use cases for PAM aren't different really than what you're doing today with other products. It's the way that we do them. It's the way we do them without, you know, we reduce the attack surface. We make sure we don't leave the artifacts behind. We can do writes to, you know, not just 80 groups, but we can do specific OUs. You know, if you want to add an 80 writes, we can do that. You know, we have the recording, the playback, live session monitoring, you know, with the ability to, you know, block active sessions or lock or terminate. Similarly, the built-in access certification. And then finally, it's, you know, it really is that this product is the simplest product, you know, really that you're ever going to deploy, because it does, you know, have everything built into it. You know, it's kind of a next type of installation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a short demonstration of the product to show you some of the use cases we've talked about. Then we'll do some Q&A, and then finally there's a slide that I'll bring up with some additional steps that I'll let Zane introduce. So let's look at the product itself, and what we'll do is we'll log in as a couple of different accounts. So we've got essentially an interface that is very easy for users to be able to navigate. If we look at the access policies, as I mentioned, this is where you can have your groups of users, or individual users, define the activities you want them to perform and where you want them to perform it. Now, as I mentioned, we got access certification. So I can look at a user, I can see, okay, access to these servers using these activities was certified by Brenda Evans at the end of June. But somebody has since that certification added another server to this access policy. So now I've got some elements which aren't certified. So this allows me to be able to not only run through a certification process, but I can see real time exactly who is certified within the system. Now, when it comes to the activities themselves, this is where there's a lot of control over how you can set up and process these. So for example, like I say, you have the activity token. This is where you're able to go in and say, create me an account based on the SAM account name, and simply once it's finished, delete it. When the user's using it, maybe I'm going to give them domain admin rights, and you'll see that there's a link at the bottom. Whatever I add at the top, we remove at the end. So, and I'll give you an example. If I add another group, let's say we'll add a local group, say Hyper-V administrators. What you see here, and you can drag and drop these around, is here's what we're adding at the top, and the bottom is linked together. And if I remove one of these, if I remove Hyper-V admins, you'll see it removes them as a pair. Now, as I mentioned, we also have the ability to be able to do things like purge a Kerberos tickets from that server. If I want to purge a Kerberos tickets at the start, I can do that. I can just simply add, the ability to purge Kerberos tickets on the host. I could run custom PowerShell. If I want to set up part of the environment, if I just want an activity that's going to be non-interactive, I can do task automation, and then I can just run a PowerShell script across hundreds or thousands of hosts, running maybe some updates or some things that I want to change on the host, maybe some discovery, all under the context of a privileged account. And we can even launch applications. So if I want to be able to do interactive app launch, for Windows, I can use remote apps, or for Linux, I can exec commands. So I might do a sudo su, within there. Now, as I mentioned, we can also, as well as doing group-based permissions, we also have AD rights. So I can add a permission. So I can say I want to give this user reset password rights to a specific OU, and then at the end, say we're going to remove it. And in this case, this is where we're actually going to launch an application as well. So let's take a look at basically how this is configured. And we'll log in as an end user. Now, the important thing is here is the fact that I'm not quite sure why that has not logged me in there. Let me just quickly do a password reset on my SbPAM user accounts, which is actually going to be here. Where are we? SbPAM users. There's my PAM accounts. Oh, there we go. It's under prod. Sorry, my Active Directory is some reason it takes it upon itself. That it actually likes to reset accounts sometimes. So what I'm going to do here is just it's gone ahead and actually disabled one of my user accounts. So we're going to enable that, and we'll give it unknown passwords. All right. Okay, so now let's go back to our use case. some reason that environment seems to be playing out. Let me just actually see if I can log in with one of my other environments. There we go, this is working. All right, so what we've done here is, this is the whole element of where we're able to go in and create the session. Now notice that, compared to a lot of other privilege management products, they normally have lists of accounts, and the user normally has to choose. So what we do is we allow the user to choose the activity you want to perform. So let's say they want to do an activity token for domain admin access. We hit next, they choose, where they want to log into. So let's say we want to access a domain controller, and they choose when they want to do it. Now, if you remember the activity token, we're basing it on the same account name. So even though it says J Smith, you see, we've actually got J Smith at the bottom, actually on this particular account. So it means that we're able to really allow the user to be able to access this solution without, essentially having to, you getting a name that you're not going to see. So we're logging the user in. This is going via the proxy. We are recording all of this information. Now, if we take a look at the OU where we're creating these accounts, let's do a refresh, and we take a look at the account that we've just generated. So let's say this ends in ADG. And we'll have a look, ADG, we'll see that it's a member of domain admin. So, we've added the permissions on the fly. The user is able to do what they need, with this particular session. Now, when the user's finished, we can simply cancel the session. Now, in this case, what this is going to do is this is now, log the user out, and it's now remove that account. So if we take a look at the domain controller and that account, and we'll just do a refresh, you'll see that ADG account has now disappeared. So what we're doing is we are allowing you, to be able to essentially remove that. Now, the other thing that we've added fairly recently, is the whole concept of live session monitoring. So let's say, for example, I've got, a session that I've created. So let's actually do an activity token to get into a domain controller through this product, through this user. The nice thing about it is that, when we do sessions, we are able to look over that person's shoulder. Now, let's say, for example, I want to look at, the history. As you saw within that session when we went through the proxy, we've got the ability to be able to play back. So, I can always go in and allow the user to be able to watch a video recording of everything that happens within there. So whether it's RDP, whether it's SSH, we allow the user, obviously for you to be able to see what's happening. Now, let's say, for example, I want somebody to be able to look over someone's shoulder. So we'll start a new session. So we're going to log into to the domain controller as this user. But what we're going to do is we're going to park this over to one side. So we'll pop this here. You see that one of the things that we've added is the ability to be able to look at what that user's doing. Now, obviously, this would normally be a different user, but they can click the little eye. Now I can see everything the user is clicking on the environment. So I'm looking over their shoulder. Now, let's say something bad is happening. We've got a lock icon. This is where I can click that lock. And now this is now informing the user that they can no longer interact with the session. So the mouse and keyboard doesn't work with this session. It's still running in the back end. Same with SSH. If you're running, SSH commands, all we're doing is stopping the user's ability to interact, with whatever session it happens to be. Now, if everything's okay, we can simply unlock it, and then the user can carry on and do whatever they're doing. Now, the other important thing as well is we can also, add additional blocking capability and also messages. So if you want to provide a custom message, for example, and if you want to write a message in Spanish, then if whatever I type here is going to appear on the user screen. So it's not like a solution that typically you would have a message and it's fixed. You can actually customize it in order to be able to allow some customized action. Plus we can also block activity as well. Now, the other thing that we've done is, we've added a capability to be able to do service account management and credential rotation. So that means then, essentially, if I have an account and I have dependents, then I can look at all of these things. Now, this is actually a generic user feed synchronization that we would normally never manage. But you're going to have examples in an environment where you're going to have services that are started out by a local account or a domain account. So if you put up a domain account, you might have hundreds of these different servers. This is where you can change. You can see real time the status, and then you can roll back if you have any difficulties. So what we're doing really, is providing basic PAM capability with this product, but at the same time, we're making sure that we have, really that notion of, clearing your attack surface. When sessions aren't running, we will remove those accounts from your, basically from your domains. So that means you don't have to worry about trust relationships. If a user needs to be able to access an environment or a system, we can create that account exactly where you need to create it based upon a template. It could be, based in the domain of a system. It could be the domain of a user. It could be based on the user's SAM account name, or you could just use fixed names in here. You can create local accounts as well as domain accounts. But the nice thing is, we're removing them when they're not in use, or you can actually keep them around simply by, creating this option. So in this case, this will create a managed account. It will, disable it when it's not in use, but it will keep it around so there's a consistent desktop experience. All right, so and the Lapse integration, I just want to finally hit on that because it's a very simple integration. Lapse, is just really two settings. It's a service account. I need to find the domain, and then we've got a very simple activity that I've just created for demonstration, where what we're saying is, okay, pull the login account from the vault, use the Lapse connector, pull the administrator account, and then enable it. And then when they finish, then disable it, and then use it in sessions in exactly the same way as we've seen with some of the other things. So at this point, what I want to do is we'll see if there's any Q&A, and then there's also another slide that I can pull up where we got some instructions that Zane will obviously help in terms of further information. So Zane, I don't know whether you want to facilitate this part of the presentation.
Yes, we do have a question, which is how about SIEM and SOAR integrations?
Yep, so SIM integration is something that we have coming up in our December release. It's generic. We're using the same backend as we do with our Stealth Defend product that will tie into a number of different vendors out of the box. Whether it's ArcSight, Sentinel, Splunk, but also have the ability to pass generic syslog as well. If you want to build in code into any application or push those events.
Okay, presumably the same thing can be used for integrating with the SOAR?
Sorry, I missed the last word, integrating with...
So with a SOAR, with a security operations automated response system?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the way that we've built this solution is, everything around this is essentially REST-based. It's a web service-based product. That means that anything you can do for the UI, we have the capability of controlling it remotely, whether it's adding users or creating sessions or any other part of that. But the other thing, to this point is, when it comes to pushing data out, we can push streams of data and that can be manipulated. We can customize the format, the way that gets sent and how it gets sent. But the important thing as well is, let's say, for example, you detect an attack that's going on. So, all of our, we're feeding information into your SOR. We've actually got, maybe some other, software that's detected an attack that's going on. You can now call the API for SbPAM and then put a lock on all the sessions, in that data center or on that subnet or around a specific resource. So we allow almost like real time, the ability to remediate or pause activity while you're evaluating things. So there's a lot of bi-directional integration available with that type of solution.
We have another question, Martin.
Yeah.
How do you force that all hosts, Windows, Linux, can only be accessed through SbPAM solution and not directly through RDP or Ssh Sessions?
Yeah, so I mean, there's use cases for both. You know, so if you, let's say, for example, you use the user's own account. If you use a requester type of login account, and so if I add domain admin rights to my account, as long as I have firewall access to a host and RDP is enabled, I can log on to that host. Now, the way that we do it, if we don't use that, if we use an activity token or a managed account, the user doesn't know what the password is. So the only way that I can access that host is by logging on through SbPAM, because it's going to provide me either local administrative rights or remote desktop user or domain admin rights to be able to access the system. But one of the other interesting things you can do with custom PowerShell, which I've seen customers do, is you can also disable RDP. So you could have a pre-session step which enables RDP. Obviously, that allows the user to log in during the session, and then you simply have a post-session step. It's just, again, it's just a PowerShell call where we can turn RDP off at the end. So, a number of different ways that you can do it, but generally, it's through making sure the user doesn't have access to an account, outside of SbPAM.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, that was very impressive, Martin. Can you just go to the next slide here? And
Sure.
okay, I just want to, okay. The person asked the question says thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Pleasure.
Okay. So, just a reminder, everyone, por asistir a este webinar, tu compañía podrá disfrutar de una instalación remota gratuita de SbPAM, una licencia de uso de 60 días. La instalación se hace en 1 hora, ya se lo comentamos, y producción en menos de 6 horas. También se puede ver un vídeo, una grabación de 5 minutos de SbPAM en español en YouTube. Es un vídeo que hizo Martin y lo hemos doblado. Si entráis en DotForce, la página web de DotForce, ahí arriba veréis que hay un acceso a la derecha. Se pone DotForce YouTube, haz clic ahí y podéis entrar ahí a ver este vídeo también si lo queréis compartir. Luego, este webinar está grabado. Luego vamos a publicar este webinar en nuestro canal de YouTube también. Okay, Martin, can you just take us to the next slide? I think, let me just check if there's any more questions. No? Okay, so thank you everyone for attending today. And we're standing by in case you have any other questions. You can always email me or give us a call if you have any other questions or you'd like to have a look at SbPAM. We're here to help you with that. Thank you, Martin, for the great presentation and the great demo. And thanks to everyone who attended today, and we hope to be in touch with you again very soon. Gracias, hasta luego.